Episode 3 of Lost Flight MH370, we will continue our investigation down the malfunction line of pursuit with a look into a few more examples of in-flight fires aboard aircraft. We want to see if these in-flight fire incidents can help illuminate the nature of the loss of Flight MH370. We will look at two incidents in particular that, when juxtaposed against Flight MH370, may help us decide if a fire malfunction event is a plausible explanation for the loss of Flight MH370. As an in-depth look into these two in-flight fire incidents would be tedious, I will just hit the highlights of each case. We will start with the case of the loss of South African Airways Flight 295. South African Airways Flight 295 took off from Chiang Kai-shek International Airport in Taipei, Taiwan on November 27, 1987 at 14:23 UTC, bound for Johannesburg, South Africa via Mauritius. The aircraft was a Boeing 747-244B Combi designating a flexible aircraft design that allows for the main aircraft cabin to be partitioned so as to carry a mixed passenger-freight combination. This design puts the passengers forward on the cabin deck and the freight stored on the same deck to the rear of the passenger cabin. Flight 295 carried 140 passengers, 5 flight crew members, and 14 cabin crew members. The aircraft was also carrying 43,225 kilograms of baggage and cargo. The calculated flight time was 10 hours and 14 minutes from Taiwan to Mauritius. At 22:30 UTC, the pilot of Flight 295 contacts the Mauritius Flight Information Center to advise them that South African Flight 295 is inbound and on course for its arrival at the Mauritius Plaisance Airport. At 23:49 UTC, a little over 9 hours into the flight, as the aircraft is approaching Mauritius, the pilot indicates to Mauritius Approach Control that the flight crew has detected smoke on board the aircraft. The pilot declares an emergency situation and requests descent to flight level 140. At 2351 UTC, the approach controller asks the pilot for his flight position. The pilot of Flight 295 replies with, "Now we have lost a lot of electrics. We haven't got anything on the aircraft now." At 000356 UTC, the approach controller clears the flight for a direct approach into the Plaisance Airport. At 000402 UTC, the pilot replies with K. This is the last communication with the aircraft. At about 000700 UTC, the aircraft impacts the Indian Ocean about 134 nautical miles northeast of the Plaisance Airport. The following accident investigation found that a fire in the rear cargo area of the aircraft led to the loss of the flight. The nature of the hazardous cargo was never specified. There were conspiracy theories floated that range from red mercury to some form of secretive rocket system in the cargo hold as being the ignition source for the fire. The exact cause of the fire aboard Flight 295 was never specified. The time from the pilot indicating to Mauritius Approach Control that he had an onboard fire to the end of the flight is approximately 18 minutes. Before we go into a comparison of South African Flight 295 with MH370, let me present one more in-flight fire incident. Asiana Airlines Flight 991 took off from the Incheon International Airport at Seoul, South Korea at 0304 local time on July 28, 2011, bound for Shanghai, China. The flight was a cargo flight with only the 2 pilots on board. Flight 991 was a Boeing 747-400F cargo aircraft carrying 58 tons of cargo, ranging from semiconductors to mobile phones to light-emitting diodes. There was also 400 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries aboard, along with paint and photoresist fluid. At 3:54 local time, about 50 minutes into the flight, the pilots of Flight 991 contact the Shanghai Area Control Center and declare an emergency due to a fire on the main deck of the aircraft. They requested an immediate descent and diversion to Jeju Airport at Jeju City, South Korea for an emergency landing. Starting at about 0401 local time, the aircraft was observed on radar undergoing a 9-minute period of erratic flight behavior. At 0409 local time, the captain of Flight 991 reports to the Jeju Area Control Center that rudder control, flight control, all are not working. At 0410 local time, the first officer states to air traffic control that we have heavy vibration on the airplane, may need to make an emergency landing, emergency ditching. At 0411 local time, radio contact with the aircraft is lost. On August 17, after an extensive search by the Korean Navy, aided by ships from Singapore and the U.S. Navy, 39 pieces of the aircraft were located on the seafloor at a depth of about 80 meters. The following investigation found that the fire had started in a ULD pallet, a unit load device containing hazardous materials. The exact nature of the fire was undetermined, but once started, the fire propagated throughout the aircraft cargo area. When the fire reached the flammable liquids being transported in the cargo hold, there was an explosion which blew out portions of the fuselage mid-air. It was estimated that from the time the fire was detected till the aircraft impacted the sea was about 18 minutes. With the onboard fire examples we have looked at so far, along with some other in-flight fire statistics, let's now begin a summation of the fire line of pursuit. As we begin the summation of our fire line of pursuit along the malfunction line of investigation, we will not only compare the 3 flights we have looked at previously, but we will expand our examination to a wider range of statistics, data, and information. Let's begin with a general look at statistics regarding fires on board aircraft. We want to concentrate on the time ranges of aircraft fires from the moment of discovery to the end of the flight. Let's take a moment to create a statistical chart of 8 aircraft fire incidents that seem most pertinent to our investigation into the loss of flight MH370. As a side note, Wikipedia lists up to 49 fire incidents aboard aircraft, but most of these incidents do not match up to the known circumstances surrounding flight MH370. The first flight data point on our chart is Aeroflot Flight 558 and Aleutian Isle 18V. From the discovery of an onboard fire to the end of the flight was only 9 minutes for Flight 558. The fire was discovered shortly after takeoff. The aircraft crashed into a field 23 kilometers from the Magnitogorsk Airport in Bashkortostan, Russia, killing all 102 people aboard on August 31, 1972. The pilots of Flight 558 were in contact with the local flight control center during the declared emergency. Our second data point is ValueJet 592, a McDonnell Douglas CD-932. A fire broke out on ValueJet 592 shortly after takeoff when expired chemical oxygen generators, which had been placed in the aircraft's cargo hold in violation of FAA regulations, ignited, causing the fire. From the discovery of the fire till the end of the flight was about 14 minutes. The aircraft crashed in the Florida Everglades, a few miles west of Miami, killing all 110 people aboard on May 11, 1996. During the entire emergency situation, the pilots were in contact with the Miami Regional Air Traffic Control. Our third data point is South African Flight 295, which we have just looked at previously. From the discovery of the fire till the end of the flight was about 18 minutes for Flight 295. The flight crashed into the Indian Ocean 134 nautical miles northeast of Mauritius with the loss of all aboard on November 28, 1987. The pilots of Flight 295 were in contact with Mauritius Air Traffic Control during the declared emergency. Our fourth data point is Asiana Flight 991, which we have also just finished reviewing earlier. From the discovery of the fire till the end of the flight was approximately 18 minutes for Flight 991. The aircraft crashed into the sea off the Korean peninsula 130 kilometers west of the Jeju City Airport, killing both pilots aboard the aircraft on July 28, 2011. The pilots of Asiana 991 were in contact with the local air traffic control center during the declared emergency. Our fifth data point is Air Canada Flight 797, which was a McDonnell Douglas DC-932. From the time of the discovery of the fire to the end of the flight was about 20 minutes. In the case of Air Canada Flight 797, the pilots were able to land the aircraft at the Cincinnati, Kentucky International Airport in Boone County, Kentucky. The landing was extremely difficult due to the deterioration of the aircraft as a result of the onboard fire. Even though the plane landed, there were still 23 fatalities among the 46 people aboard the aircraft, as there was a flashover fire within the aircraft cabin 90 seconds after landing on June 3, 1983. The fatalities were 23 passengers who were trapped in the main cabin and perished in the fire. The pilots of Flight 797 were in contact with local air traffic control during the declared emergency. Our sixth data point is Swiss Air Flight 111, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11. From the time of the discovery of the fire to the end of the flight was about 21 minutes for Flight 111. Swiss Air Flight 111 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean just off Nova Scotia, Canada, approximately 41 kilometers southwest of the city of Halifax. All 129 people aboard the aircraft were killed in the crash on September 2, 1998. The pilots of Flight 111 were in contact with local air traffic control during their declared emergency. Our seventh data point is Aeroflot Flight 2306, a Tupolev Tu-134AK. From the time of the discovery of the fire to the end of the flight was about 22 minutes. Flight 2306 crash-landed in the Komi region of Russia, 75 kilometers southwest of the town of Syktyvkar on July 2, 1986. There were 54 fatalities among the 86 people aboard the aircraft. During their declared emergency, the pilots of Flight 2306 were in contact with local air traffic control. Our final data point is UPS Flight 6, which was reviewed in Episode 2 of my series on Lost Flight MH370. From the time of the discovery of the fire to the end of the flight was about 29 minutes. UPS Flight 6 crashed near Dubai in the United Arab Emirates with the loss of both pilots aboard on September 3, 2010. Till the end of the flight, the pilot in charge was in contact with Region Air Traffic Control via relay aircraft. These 8 flights represent the closest matches to the circumstances surrounding the loss of MH370 if one is to postulate that an onboard fire was the cause of the loss of Flight MH370. Yet, even these 8 instances are still far removed from any resemblance to the known circumstances surrounding the loss of Flight MH370. Let's add the anomalous flight time data point of Flight MH370 to our chart. From the 39-minute point in Flight MH370's flight timeline, when the transponder goes offline, to the end of the flight is about 6 hours and 54 minutes. It's easy to see just how far the MH370 data point lies outside the statistical norms of the other flights just presented. UPS Flight 6 represents the longest plotted flight time with an onboard fire at 29 minutes. On Flight MH370, the first anomalous clue we have in the flight timeline is the transponder going offline at 39 minutes into the flight. Beyond that 39-minute mark, what was transpiring on board the aircraft itself is a mystery. We do know that MH370 flew on for almost 7 hours beyond the loss of the transponder, far in excess of the flight time of UPS-6 after its declared emergency. The pilots of MH370 failed to contact local air traffic control centers with any notice of a declared emergency. The pilots of MH370 sought no navigational aid from local air traffic control in order to obtain a flight vector to the nearest airfield. The pilots of MH370 were experienced trained pilots, yet they displayed no attempt to follow their training procedures if indeed a fire was the cause of the emergency aboard flight MH370. After the transponder signal was lost, MH370 flew on in silence, making 3 major course changes, which ultimately took it deep into the southern Indian Ocean. In the case of our 8 example flights just mentioned, the pilots of the aircrafts involved contacted their local flight control centers, declared an emergency, and sought to safely return their aircrafts to a nearby airfield. From the pilots of flight MH370, nothing. There is also the glaring fact that MH370's SDU or satellite data unit, which had gone offline, mysteriously comes back online at about 1 hour and 43 minutes into the flight. It seems highly unlikely that if a fire did damage the avionics on board flight MH370, that the avionics would then suddenly repair themselves over 1 hour into an onboard fire. We also have the strange timing coincidences which seem to work against the randomness of a fire event. 1. MH370's transponder goes offline just as it is transiting from the Kuala Lumpur Flight Control Region to the Ho Chi Minh Flight Control Region. 2. The SDU, or Satellite Data Unit, comes back online just as the aircraft has passed out of the range of the Malaysian military radar coverage. It's hard to believe the timing of these 2 events represents random coincidence. From all available evidence, MH370 flies on deep into the southern Indian Ocean, where it crashes into the sea after exhausting its fuel supply. Logically, looking at the evidence presented, there is no indication that a fire event was responsible for the loss of the flight. We need to look elsewhere to illuminate the darkness surrounding the disappearance of flight MH370. In episode 4 of my series on Lost Flight MH370, we will continue our investigation down the malfunction line of pursuit. We want to examine the possibility that a malfunction of the electrical system may have led to the loss of flight MH370 and all aboard.